Venerable Ariyadhammika to teach us the Dhamma. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
As I said earlier, it's a pleasure to be back. Has been quite a while since I've been here, and just yesterday evening I arrived, and I felt very warmly welcome by some of the committee members, caretakers, volunteers. So it was very nice coming back and being here again today. And the sense of hospitality is one of the Dhamma qualities that the Buddha always encouraged, and you can see here in places like this the principle of that being very well incorporated. And it's just amazing wherever we go, like in the Dhamma family, we can tune in, fit in, and then having a good time together, enjoying the Dhamma together, and learning from the Buddha's teachings. So I like very much that spirit. On the one side, we monks, we are homeless, but at the same time also we feel at home sometimes very quickly when we are so warmly welcome, like here yesterday at SJBA. So big sadhu also from my side for your hospitality. And generally speaking, even up in SBS, Monk Training Center, every day in the morning we have Dhamma activities where the devotees come in Taiping to our place, and we have a short Dhamma discussion or guided meditations. And usually devotees are also very kind and respectful to us. It's kind of interesting sometimes to observe, sometimes the ladies, they're so polite, so extra careful, respectful, and courteous. And then at the end, when the Dhamma sermon, Dhamma talk is over, she turns to her husband, get a car, what takes you so long? Let's go. So I noticed quite a difference in attitude when they speak with us monks compared when they speak with the family member, husband and wife. It does not sound quite the same. Sometimes I'm like shocked, Is it the same person? How come? That lady is so sweet, so soft-spoken when she speaks with us. But when she speaks with her husband, it's quite different, So then sometimes you might wonder, actually, what is the difference? Why at some locations and some places, we tend to be very careful, very courteous, very polite. And then in some other occasions, or with other people, we tend to be a bit more direct. In fact, family, isn't that the place where you or we have chosen, well, chosen or not chosen, I don't know, but that's the place where you actually spend the most time with the people in the family. So this is actually the area where it would be fit to be the most careful, the most kind, polite with each other, because these are the people who matter the most. Whereas other people who you see only once a week or rarely, you make a small mistake, not so bad. But with family, where you live together day by day, it matters actually much more. So it's actually the opposite of how it should be. Normally with strangers we are very careful, very polite, but with family the tone can change quite quickly. So sometimes I was reflecting, what are the qualities that make one worthy of respect, of kindness? Because I assume everybody wants to be treated respectfully. Raise your hand if you'd like to be treated kindly and respectfully. Who does not want that? So it's very natural, that's how we like to be received and treated everywhere. So, but then also sometimes the question, if you notice, actually people are not relating well to you, or there seems to be a tendency, some people are very kind to others, but not to you. Sometimes you can ask yourself also, maybe, am I contributing to this in any way? Is there anything that I'm doing that makes me maybe less worthy of respect or gratitude than maybe some of the others? Maybe they have some qualities that make them particularly worthwhile and worthy of hospitality, gratitude, or even sometimes we raise our hands in Anjali. So there's actually an interesting sutta where the Buddha points out 7 factors that make a person worthy of these qualities. Do you want to know them? Yeah. So actually we can look together at Anguttara Nikaya 7.68. The title of this sutta is One Who Knows the Dhamma. One Who Knows the Dhamma is the title of the sutta. And there the sutta starts out by saying, actually let me give a small precursor to the sutta. Whenever we read the Buddha's words together, or even if you read it on your own, nowadays we are in the fortunate situation that the Dhamma has been translated in our common languages, isn't it? Like here now, I hope most of you understand English, so we have translations into English. The Dhamma has also been translated into Spanish, French, Chinese, so many languages. So, and we have pretty good translators, and that job is done already. So the translation from Pali into our common language. But actually we have to translate it a second time. Because the Buddha spoke in India. India is not the same as Malaysia. And he spoke basically in a very different country and culture, and also at a very different time. He didn't live in the 21st century. There was no YouTube, no Facebook. So a very different mindset and different similes that the Buddha was giving compared to a present-day teacher probably. So we kind of have to translate the sutta a second time from the ancient setting into our common current setting. So it's not a literal translation, but it's a contemplation in our minds. How can these words, how do they apply to my own life? Can you find something similar to those ancient situations in my own environment? So this is, you can call it also a type of translation. And also, as you know, often the Buddha was surrounded by monks and by nuns. So many of the discourses are a bit tailored to this audience. So there are some they speak particularly about things that are quite particular for monastics. But then among us today, how many monastics are here? Raise your hand. Just me, huh? Yet, actually, if you look closely at the meaning and the teachings behind it, you can actually see the principles underneath and then apply them also in your own life. So this is also a kind of translation work that you're doing. So when we read the words of the Buddha, it's not just enough to read them. We have to think along and think, how can I apply that in my own life? What's the relevance? He speaks to monks in ancient India, but how does that apply to me right now? So I would like to invite you, now when we go through this sutta together, about the 7 qualities that make a person worthy of respect and so on, how does that apply? How can we translate that into our own lives? Huh? So I will need a bit your collaboration a bit later, where we try to find examples to put that also into practice in our own lives. Okay, so let's start out by, at the beginning, the Buddha says, bhikkhus. So he addresses the monks. Possessing 7 qualities, a bhikkhu is worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitality, worthy of offerings, worthy of reverential salutation, meaning anjali. An unsurpassed field of merit for the world. So, 7 qualities. Do you know the Pali for that? No? It's too bad. Actually, I think you know. You just don't know that you know. You don't know Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Uchupadupan. Huh? So this is actually what it says here. 7 qualities that make you ahuneyo, worthy of gifts, pahuneyo, worthy of hospitality, takineyo, offerings, anjali karaniyo. This is actually that famous passage that we chant so often. So what are the qualities that make a person worthy of gifts, offerings, and so on? So here, what 7 are they? So first the Buddha explains what they are, just briefly gives you the 7 points, and then he explains in what detail the meaning. What are the 7? Here a bhikkhu is one who knows the Dhamma. He knows the Dhamma. But also who knows the meaning, who knows himself, who knows moderation, who knows the proper time. So now it's 9:30. Is it that time? No, maybe not that proper time. He knows the assembly and who knows the superior and inferior kinds of persons. So these are the 7 things. So the first one, what was it? Do you remember? The first one in the list, he knows the Dhamma. He knows the Dhamma. Then the Buddha explains, what is this? Here a bhikkhu knows the Dhamma, the discourses, the suttas, the mixed prose and verse, expositions, verses like the Dhammapada, Jataka, these are verses, gathas, inspired utterances, udanas, quotations and birth stories, and also marvelous accounts and questions and answers. So these named categories is how originally in the very early stages, this is how the Dhamma was classified. At the beginning they didn't have Digha Nikaya, Majjhima Nikaya, Anguttara Nikaya, Samyutta Nikaya. They didn't have these books at the beginning. So they classified them in these 9 categories. Some words of the Buddha were just verses. Sometimes verse and prose were mixed. It's another category. Sometimes suttas. There's a story behind where a person sees the Buddha, then they have a Dhamma discussion. So these are the suttas. Sometimes Q&A style, question-answer. So these are different styles of texts. So this is a person who knows the Dhamma, is a person who knows these different types of the Buddha's teachings. So basically nowadays we just say, you know the suttas, the teachings of the Buddha. And if a bhikkhu did not know the Dhamma, those 9 things, he would not be called one who knows the Dhamma. But because he knows the Dhamma, therefore he is called one who knows the Dhamma. So this refers to a person, or to a bhikkhu, who knows, has heard the teachings of the Buddha and knows it. Again, how does that apply to our own life? Well, probably not so different, right? So it's not limited only to monks and nuns. So a devotee who comes to SJBA on Sunday mornings regularly will eventually become one who knows the Dhamma, because you get to listen to the Dhamma. Or sometimes you can read on your own. You can take some of the Buddha's books, Buddhist books, and read the Dhamma there. Or nowadays you can go to YouTube, TikTok. And TikTok, I'm not so sure whether you find much Dhamma there. Better leave the TikTok aside, I think. Because there are so many other things, you might not spend much time listening to the Dhamma. So nowadays there are many ways of hearing the Dhamma. That would all qualify as somebody who acquires knowledge and eventually knows the Dhamma. And it's very useful, because without knowing the Dhamma, how do we know what is skillful, what is unskillful, what is wholesome, what is unwholesome? So actually we kind of need the support from the Buddha for that. Now some people are very confident, they say, actually my intuition tells me what is right and what is wrong. Yes, maybe sometimes, but not always. You see, if our intuitions of what is good, what is bad, what is wholesome, what is unwholesome, if our own wisdom and knowledge would be so great, why are you still here? Why are we still being reborn? So very obviously, our own intuitions of what to do, what not to do, are not so great, because if it were, there would be no more suffering. And we would have become liberated already long ago. So obviously, our intuitions are not reliable to know this is right, this is wrong. We need the support of the Dhamma, the wisdom coming from the Buddha. And then, of course, that alone is not enough. We also have to put it into practice. But that can nudge us, can point us in the right direction, isn't it? So we need both. The external source, but then also our own development and practice. So this is a person who knows the Dhamma, who knows the Buddha's teachings, basically. So, how many among you qualify for that? Would you say you're a person who knows the Dhamma? A little bit? Tapo. So yeah, I mean, there's also different grades. I mean, there are so many levels of knowing the Dhamma. The Dhamma is so vast, so profound. And even so, we have here a thick book. Even that is not enough. Then there's another book and another book. So the whole Sutta Pitaka nowadays is 15 books, or in some versions even 18 books. So that's quite a lot. Whereas if you're a Muslim or a Christian, just one book, isn't it? You have the Bible, one book. The Quran, one book. The Buddhist scriptures, 15 books. And commentaries, of course, then becomes much more even. So it's also understandable, of course, that we don't know all the Dhamma in detail, because it is quite comprehensive. So this is the first quality that makes a person worthy of offerings, worthy of respect, worthy of kindness, and so on. Secondly, and how is a bhikkhu one who knows the meaning? Knows the meaning. He, bhikkhu, knows the meaning of this and that statement thus. This is the meaning of this statement. This is the meaning of that statement. If a bhikkhu did not know the meaning of this and that statement, he would not be called one who knows the meaning. But because he knows the meaning of this and that statement, therefore he is called, he is one who knows the meaning. So, he is one who knows the Dhamma and who knows the meaning. Okay? So it's not enough just to know the Dhamma, but you also have to understand what it means. Nowadays, I think any one of you have a parrot. I think we have all seen parrots. Parrots also can repeat, if you train them properly, they can repeat some of the words or phrases, and quite cute, They can say good morning in the morning, and sometimes people teach them even some curse words. But then actually, really, the parrot does not understand our language. He can learn to repeat certain things, but if you speak with him, he does not comprehend whatever you say. But if you say the same thing over and over again, he will remember it over time. Especially if you give him some reward, some food, then you can train him in this way. But hopefully, there should be a small difference between a parrot and a Dhamma practitioner. So only memorizing the Buddha's teachings and hearing it is not enough. We also have to understand the meaning. Yeah? Otherwise, you're like a parrot on a pirate ship, just hearing the Dhamma, but not understanding what it means. So we have to investigate, contemplate, try to find out what is the meaning of the Dhamma, what is the Buddha trying to point to, rather than just hearing it and then moving on. So understanding the meaning, asking questions, that's important. Number 3, how is a bhikkhu one who knows himself? Here the Buddha doesn't speak about self in the ultimate sense like an atta, but about one's own qualities. For example, he knows himself thus: I have so much faith, saddha, or so much virtuous behavior, or learning, generosity, wisdom, and discernment. If a bhikkhu did not know himself, I have so much faith, virtue, learning, generosity, and wisdom, then he would not be called a person who knows himself. But a person who knows, my level of faith is moderate or medium, and he knows my wisdom is like this, my sila is like that, and then you can say, you're a person who knows yourself. So in this way, the Buddha says, one becomes a person who knows oneself. So it's interesting, the Buddha here encourages us to also take an open and also an honest look at our own qualities and discern where are our strengths and where are our weaknesses. So, virtue. Okay, so you can check yourself, right? How is your ability to keep the 5 precepts? So just a bit earlier, we were undertaking the 5 precepts. Which is easier, undertaking or keeping? Some people are very good in undertaking the precepts, but not so good in keeping. Some people, every day they undertake the precepts, but then also every day break them. Actually, sometimes I'm curious also, which one among the 5 precepts do you find the most difficult to maintain for longer periods? Killing would be killing not just human beings. I hope most of you can do that, to abstain from that, but also includes, of course, insects like mosquitoes, ants, smaller pests, cockroaches. So it can sometimes be challenging, isn't it? Because they can be quite annoying, and if you don't protect yourself, it will be itchy or painful. Or the other one, stealing, taking what is not given. You know that it's not for you, but then you take it nonetheless when nobody looks. Sexual misconduct, being faithful in one's relationship, lying, misrepresenting the truth, or taking intoxicants. Among these 5, which one do you find the most difficult? Killing? Raise your hand if killing is a bit of a challenge. Okay, quite a few. Stealing? Nobody dare to say. Sexual misconduct? I'm not telling your wife. It's just among us. Lying can also sometimes happen. Yeah. White lies, yeah. And lastly, intoxicants or drugs, maybe at social events, celebrations with the company, on the workplace, friends, sometimes. I'm not raising my hand, I'm just saying. So I've seen from your responses, it seems then that killing, probably mosquitoes, can be difficult to abstain from. So then the meaning is, okay, this means many of the areas of the 5 precepts, you seem to be quite okay, but then there is still some weaknesses. No? So maybe not 100%, but maybe 80 or 70. So this would be a way of knowing your virtue level. So being honest with oneself and say, okay, this one is a bit difficult, that one I can do quite well. So this is self-assessment. It's actually important that you know where you are so that you know where you need to develop. And then you do the same in these other categories about mindfulness, concentration, wisdom, learning the Buddha's teachings. So then when you self-assess, you know, okay, these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses. And often people like to spend a lot of time with things where they are very good already. Because you like it, that's why you're good at it. But those weaknesses we don't want to look at because, well, that's why I'm weak at it. So actually these ones also need to be cultivated. So it's good not to overlook the obvious blind spots, obvious to others maybe, but not obvious to oneself, and then also to cultivate those qualities. So what is my level of virtue, faith, generosity, and wisdom? So in this way, a person who knows that also becomes worthy of reverence, of offerings, hospitality, because you're honest with yourself. You don't overestimate yourself, but also not underestimating. So knowing one's qualities. Okay. Next one. How is a bhikkhu one who knows moderation? Moderation. Here, bhikkhu knows moderation in accepting robes, alms food, lodgings, and medicines, and provisions for the sick. If a bhikkhu did not know moderation in accepting these things, he would not be one who is called he knows moderation. But if he does know moderation, then he's called one who knows moderation. So the Buddha here encourages not to indulge, even for monks, the offerings that we are given, usually for free. Still, the monks are encouraged to be careful, not to overspend, not to ask for things that are not really necessary, and also to make good use of those items that we were given and not to let them go to waste, and take good care of them, or repair them if necessary. So these are ways of knowing moderation. And sometimes people are very kind, very generous, and they might even want to spoil the Sangha or take the monk out for a fancy restaurant. But then it's up to the monk to say, actually, I don't need that. If you can just organize something simple, I don't need to go to a 5-star restaurant for eating, right? So sometimes you have opportunities, but it doesn't mean you have to accept and take whatever you can get. Knowing one's measure, knowing moderation is very important. And I would assume the same is the case even in your own lives. Can we come up with some examples in your own life where you feel moderation is a good, important quality to have? Or maybe where you have seen people lacking moderation, where you feel that's not quite right? Any example that comes to mind from your own experience or from your own life about moderation or lack thereof? Maybe like a birthday party. And sometimes, usually in the West, I think here also you get a birthday cake sometimes, and very nice cake, chocolate cake or whatever is your favorite. And it's not your birthday, maybe somebody else's birthday, but you really like that cake. But then if there's just small pieces around, and then a large group of people, well, you could just take the biggest piece, or 2 or 3, right? But that would not be a sign of moderation, and then nobody else can get something anymore. So again, it wouldn't look so good, and it's not so appropriate if there's just a limited amount of something, and then really to indulge and plunder the whole buffet somewhere, because I really like that cake, or that biscuit, or whatever it is. So I think that happens from time to time. I think you must have experienced with that also, right? The people just being very selfish and plundering the whole buffet on their own. Any other examples from your own experience where a person knows or does not know moderation? Durian. Difficult to know moderation with durian, it seems, huh? So yeah, again, a small amount of durian is available, and then a person just taking one after another, right? So food is one of the classic ones. But then even with other things, clothes. Most of you are having clothes already, I can see. Still, there might be an interest in going shopping, getting the latest fashion. I think it's especially for the younger generation, boys, girls. So even though you already have a whole dress room full of clothes and garments, still the mind finds or wants to get something new, something better, something nicer, something different. And then often when you come back, okay, you put it in, how often are you really using it? Isn't it? In fact, all the items we have in our house, how many items do you have? How many objects are there in your living room? 5? 50? 500? Well, sometimes can be quite a lot, right? It accumulates over time. And if you don't declutter from time to time, it will just be crammed and full everywhere. But it's interesting, all the objects that we have, all the items that you see around, once we didn't have them. And there was a time where you had desire, craving for that object. And then you got it, you purchased it, or somebody offered it. So all these items that we now have were once among those of which we thought, if I have that, I'll be really happy. It will be great if I have that. That piece of clothes, that piece of item on the shelf, they were all once things that we desired. But now, when you go into your living room, are you really so happy every time you see the thing standing on the shelf? No, right? It makes almost no difference. Most of the objects, they don't contribute much to our daily well-being. Maybe some do, a fridge, a fan, these things can contribute quite substantially. But then there's many other things that, if they were not there, nobody would mind, I guess. So again, knowing moderation is a way also of not overspending, and also knowing the limitations of how much these things can really contribute to our subjective sense of well-being. Because usually we overestimate that, isn't it? We think, if I have that, I will be so happy. But then often it makes almost no difference. I remember when I was 14 years old, back home in Austria, at that time, I like to play race games on the computer, like Formula 1 car race games. And at that time, I just had a keyboard for acceleration. You press one key, left, right, the other key. But then some of my friends, they had the steering wheel. Quite nice, and now they have a steering wheel and the pedals. You can drive like a real car. I thought, wow, if I would have that, I thought that would be so fantastic. So eventually my birthday came along and I got the steering wheel. And wow, yeah, I was quite happy at the time. But then for how long did that happiness last? Well, 3 months later something else came out and my desires came up for something else and something new, something different. And nowadays, well, how much has it really contributed to my well-being on the long run? Almost nothing. So it's the same with all the items that we think, we go shopping, marketing, most of them don't contribute much. So it's good to know moderation because we already know in advance most of the things are not as important as they seem to be. So even with things that are justifiable, that are reasonable, even there, the Buddha encourages the monks, but also we all can take that principle on board to know the right measure with food, drinks, medicine even, lodgings. Yeah. How many houses do I need? How many cars, clothes, whatever it is. Next one. How is a bhikkhu one who knows the proper time? Who knows the proper time? So what's the time now? Maybe it's not that proper time. Here bhikkhu knows the proper time thus. This is the time for learning. This is the time for questioning. This is the time for exertion, for making effort. This is the time for seclusion. If a bhikkhu did not know the proper time for learning, seclusion, and all the rest, he would not be called one who knows the proper time. So what does that point to? Knowing when is the right time to do the right thing. So all these things, these subjects that the Buddha gave here, learning the Dhamma, practicing meditation, going into seclusion, asking questions, these are all the wholesome things to do. None of them is bad. Yet the Buddha says there's a right time and there's a wrong time for that, isn't it? So for example, if you're at the workplace and it's probably the time to work and not to ask questions about the Dhamma. So if you mix those things up and do the opposite, that wouldn't be appropriate. And some people might even find this person is quite strange. And also your co-workers and your boss might not be happy if all the time on the workplace you bring out the Dhamma book and start reading. And vice versa also. If here you come to the sutta class or Dhamma discussion and then you do some crochet or knitting or some other projects, would also be a bit strange. It seems the person is not paying attention. So there's the right time for different things. So knowing the time, what is the time for study, for practice, for relaxing, for making effort, is quite important actually. So sometimes you have to schedule all the useful things of the day, throughout the week, so that you know, okay, this is the right time for this. Later I won't be free for that. So the Buddha encourages also some foresight and knowing what's the right time for doing different things. Is this something you consider important for your own life, knowing the right time? Is this something that comes up from time to time? Yeah? So I think, especially nowadays where we have so many different tasks and challenges and projects to accomplish, knowing when to do what becomes more and more important. And many people try to start multitasking, doing many things at the same time. But interestingly, they did some research, and it turns out that the brain is not really able to multitask. The brain is very fast, and the mind is fast. You can switch between tasks, but actually really you can pay attention only to one thing at a time. I don't know here in Malaysia, but in Austria, when I was driving, and if you are on the phone at the same time, and the police catch you, you will have to pay a fine, isn't it? So, but then what's the problem? I can drive and I can be on the phone at the same time, right? No problem. Well, maybe you can to some degree still function, but actually your attention on the road is not very good. And also the attention on the phone with your conversation is also not as deep and productive as it would be if we would do just that. So basically the brain has to switch between the tasks. And every time you switch, you lose a little bit of the train of thought that you've been just earlier. You cannot just switch like a computer, duck, duck. It takes some time until you get back to your topic. Probably you have the experience if you write an email or a message on the phone while watching a movie or something else. Yeah, you can still write, but then actually you miss out on what the movie is saying or what is going on there. Or pay attention to the movie, you cannot write anymore. So actually there's a cost of switching. Even though we feel, oh, I'm very good at multitasking. Actually, most likely not. And actually you would be much more productive doing one thing at a time. And then, when finished, switch to the next one. That is like the old style of doing it. But nowadays we think we have to do many things at the same time. It's actually not as productive, but also not very peaceful. You kind of feel very stressed and you feel it's not comfortable having to do so many things simultaneously. And often actually we don't have to. We choose to do it like that. You could put certain things aside and then just focus on one thing and then do the other thing. So again, knowing the right time to do what. So again, this is a very relevant challenge and a very relevant thing to learn if you don't want to be only productive, but also you want to feel peaceful and at ease. Because otherwise you can be quite stressed out by switching between so many tasks. So interesting sometimes how science and psychology, how they relate also with the Buddha's teachings, where we can learn from each other and also have support from science, justifying some of the Buddha's teachings and explaining how, yeah, truly you cannot multitask. So interesting how the disciplines come together sometimes. So knowing the proper time. Number 6, how is a bhikkhu one who knows the assembly? One who knows the assembly. Here a bhikkhu knows the assembly. This is an assembly of Khatyas. This is an assembly of Brahmins. This is an assembly of householders. This is an assembly of ascetics. So as we know, in ancient India, they had the caste system. So they had the Brahmins on top, the warriors, the Khatyas, householders, so ascetics. Among these, one should approach this assembly in such a way. One should stop in such a way. One should act in such a way. One should sit down in a certain way. One should remain silent in a certain way. One should speak in a certain way. One should, If a bhikkhu did not know the assembly, then he wouldn't be one who knows the assembly. So basically the Buddha encourages us to know what is appropriate, what is the right way of conduct in different situations. So when you're with your family, your way of acting probably should be a bit different than compared to the workplace. And on the workplace it should be a bit different compared to when to come to SJBA here on a Sunday morning. So both the way we dress, the way we speak, the way we interact, there are certain codes of conduct, some norms of conduct, of etiquette. And the Buddha says we should know those and try to adapt, adjust. Almost like a chameleon, chameleon sits somewhere in the bushes. You can't even see it, where's the chameleon? It changes the color and you can barely discern it. It's like somebody who blends in. Wherever he goes, he just fits in. You think, and there's some of the Dhamma teachers also who were very good at that. I think Ajahn Chah is quite well known for this quality of changing his style, changing his speech, dependent on with whom he was talking to. So sometimes people would come to visit him, most of the time like farmers from the countryside. So he would speak very simply with them, use similes from farming, about the plow and sowing the seeds on the field. And they would understand and they would say, wow, fantastic. He speaks my language. But then 5 minutes later, a businessman from Bangkok comes in and has very different lifestyle, very different questions. And Ajahn Chah would change and would give different similes about corporate life and things like that. So somebody who knows to adjust so that the conversation partner or the situation so that it fits. And this you can do really well only when you can learn to let go of your own preferences, of your own personality almost. Because if you have such a strong own personality, this is how I say things, this is how I do things, you cannot switch, you cannot adjust, you cannot blend in, because you have only your own one style, and this is how you are. But if you learn to let go of your ego, of yourself, of your identity, you can adjust, you can blend in, no problem. So the more you learn to let go, well, this is my preferred style, but if I go to speak with these people, I will adjust, I dress differently. So knowing the right circumstances, dressing is a good example actually, because different locations is also expected sometimes to dress differently, right? If you go out in the evening with your friends or family to enjoy yourself, you dress in one way. But when you come to the monastery, hopefully people will dress a bit differently compared to that. So certain things what is appropriate in one situation would not be considered so appropriate in another, and vice versa. So again, dressing, speaking, acting, and letting go of one's personal preferences and styles sometimes, and just adapting, adjusting, is a very good quality actually, if you can do that. Have you met people that join certain activities somewhere and they feel so out of place, so not fitting in? This is, sometimes it's just because one doesn't know yet. If you're new somewhere, you don't know their style. But some people also, they just don't care. They just do their own thing. It doesn't matter where he goes, he's always the same, and does not know how to adapt. And there are some others who are very good at that, kind of blending everywhere. The first time coming in, and then seems to be part of the group since 20 years. So it's very inspiring when you can learn to blend, adjust, and let go of your own style or preferences sometimes. Sure, of course, we can have also our own individual character traits. There's no problem with that. But then we can adjust from there a little bit in the different directions. So again, a person like that, the Buddha says, is worthy of kindness, hospitality, offerings, because he respects the environment in which he goes. He respects the other people around him. So this is one who knows the assembly. And then lastly, how is a bhikkhu one who knows superior and inferior kinds of persons? Here, a bhikkhu understands persons in terms of pairs of two. Two persons. One who wants to see the noble ones, and one who does not want to see the noble ones. The person who does not want to see the noble ones is in that respect blameworthy. The person who wants to see the noble ones is in that respect praiseworthy. So a person who is interested to see holy men or Dhamma teachers, or even traveling, some people travel to different countries to visit some of the ajahns or sayadaws. So a person who has the desire to see Dhamma practitioners who are advanced in their practice, doing that from time to time, so the Buddha says, is kind of praiseworthy, because you get to hear the Dhamma. Whereas a person who doesn't care, we're all the same anyway, who would they be able to teach me or to share with me, is on that account blameworthy. It's not that you're doing something evil, but you miss out on the chance for growth by not making the effort to reach out to those who might be able to help and contribute. Another two persons who want to see the noble ones. One wants to hear the good Dhamma, and the other one does not want to hear the good Dhamma. The one who wants to hear the good Dhamma is praiseworthy on that account, the other one is blameworthy. So maybe some people also, they come to the monastery, they come to see us monks, but then they only ask, oh Bande, how is life in Austria? How's the climate? How many people are there? So no interest in the Dhamma actually. They come to see the Dhamma teachers, but then they ask only worldly things, only worldly conversation. Bande, do you like durian or not? So even if you know the answer, how does that make your life better? In no way that does not add much value. But if you engage a person in a Dhamma conversation, oh, Bante, I have really difficulties with keeping my precept about killing mosquitoes. is there any tricks or how to do that, how to maintain that virtue? There could be something that the person can share and contribute. So if you ask the right questions, you have a high chance of learning something and acquiring something of value. Whereas if we just chit-chat, small talk, yeah, it can also be nice, but then actually we are missing out on some of the good opportunities. How would that apply in your lay life, in your own private life or corporate life? Situations, asking the right questions. Are there similar situations you can think about? So, seeing the right people first, and then also wanting to hear the good Dhamma. So maybe sometimes you go on a short trip with your colleagues from the workplace. So you're sitting in the bus together with somebody else, or sometimes even maybe some of the superiors also sitting just next to you. So actually this could be a good opportunity to engage him in a small conversation and get to know each other. And you could speak a little bit about how you're doing in the company, or inquire some knowledge and information from the superiors there. So having a friendly exchange could be a very good opportunity. And who knows, maybe later on, when they have a few people for promotions, the person might remember you. Oh, actually, this was quite a nice fellow. Had quite a good attitude. He wanted to contribute to our workplace. And then that opportunity, he will remember the conversation that you had. So knowing the situation and knowing, okay, we could have a meaningful conversation can be useful not only in the Dhamma circles, but also any other situation where together with interesting people, and then also engaging them in a useful, meaningful conversation rather than just idle chat or some chit-chat. So this is how you translate the Dhamma into your own life. You know, here he speaks about asking questions about the Dhamma, but something similar can also be applied in other situations. Then there are two people who listen to the Dhamma. When you get to hear the Dhamma, then one of them listens to the Dhamma with eager ears, and the other one does not listen with eager ears, does not pay proper attention. So one is more praiseworthy than the other. So you might hear something, but not paying full attention. Then two persons who listen to the Dhamma with eager ears. One, having heard the Dhamma, retains it in mind. The other one, having heard the Dhamma, does not retain it in mind. It goes in one ear, goes out the other. Nothing in between. So making an effort to recollect the Dhamma, to remember it, that also is like an extra step that sometimes we have to take. You don't have to write it down, and writing down also can help. But just thinking, let me not forget this. So that is also something useful. When you have a meaningful conversation with somebody says something, let me remember that. Two persons, having heard the Dhamma and retain it in mind. One examines the meaning of the teachings that he has heard, the other one does not. So he remembers it, but he doesn't think it over. He doesn't contemplate about it. So again, the one who does not contemplate is blameworthy on that account. The other one who thinks it over, contemplates, investigates, that is praiseworthy. One understands it, the other one does not. And then two persons also, both have understood the meaning and the Dhamma, but one does not practice accordingly. He understands it, he knows it, has contemplated, but he does not practice accordingly. The other one practices accordingly. So the first one is blameworthy on that account, the other one is praiseworthy. Because the Buddha's teachings is like a map. It's like a guide. It leads you, it points you in the right direction. But just looking at the map and not going on the journey also doesn't fulfill the purpose. Some people really fall in love with the map. My Dhamma, my Buddha. In Myanmar even they call, our Buddha. They say our or my Buddha. Our Buddha said this and this. Becomes a possession almost. And people like to buy all the books and then put it nicely on the bookshelf. Oh, wonderful, having the Dhamma there. Sadhu, sadhu. Then the Dhamma becomes something of respect and reverence, it's okay. But if you don't put it into practice, that's not enough. That's not the purpose of the Dhamma. Then it becomes just something else to identify with, to crave towards, maybe even fight with others. Oh wait, no, you misunderstood it. I understand it properly. You have wrong view. I have right view. That's not the purpose of the Dhamma. It's like grasping the snake from behind and then it turns around and bites you. So, learning the Dhamma, hearing the Dhamma, memorizing it, but then also putting it into practice in our daily lives. That's the purpose. So that's the purpose of a map. That's the purpose of a Buddha, of the Tathagata. So it is in this way a person practices the Dhamma, the other one does not. Possessing these 7 qualities, a bhikkhu is worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitality, worthy of offerings, worthy of reverential salutation, and an unsurpassed field of merit for the world. Okay. So which among these 7 would you say, this is not my question, which of the 7 do you see is the most important one for yourself? Remember the first one? Knowing the Dhamma, one who knows the Dhamma. The second one knows the meaning. Who thinks knowing the Dhamma is the most important one there? Or knowing the meaning? Who? Yeah, a few? Yeah, it's quite important, I agree. Knowing oneself, have that amount of virtue, concentration, wisdom. Yeah? Anyone? Yeah? One who knows moderation, knows the right amount. That's also a nice one, huh? One who knows the proper time. The time for learning, for practice, for asking questions, for remaining silent. One who knows the assembly. He knows how to fit in their different contexts, different groups. One who knows who is superior and inferior, the superior and inferior kinds of persons that we covered now at the end. So just imagine you could fulfill all these 7 qualities, how your life would be. One who knows the Dhamma, contemplates, puts it into practice, can blend in all the situations. So your social life is very harmonious, it's very fluid, and you're very adaptive. Your Dhamma life, you're rich with virtue, concentration, wisdom. The life becomes very easy. And also, this is the way how you really make yourself worthy of respect. You don't have to demand anyone, please be kind to me, please respect me. People will naturally be inclined to treat such a person very well, very kindly, because you're a treasure. Your words have meaning, and people want to listen. They might even give you some money or some gifts that they can listen to you. Say, this is the opposite. But once you have to demand respect and say, oh, you have to be kind to me, this is the best way of losing it, isn't it? So we're making ourselves worthy of these qualities. So this is the right way of actually gaining honor, praise, respect. And sometimes you gain it, sometimes you don't. In the end, it doesn't matter. But definitely this would be the way of making ourselves a good field of merit for others and worthy of hospitality, gratitude, and respect. Okay? So I think I keep it at that for today. And if there's any questions, I would like to open up for questions or comments on the topic we have just shared, or anything in general. Dhamma is also okay.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Yes? Should we pass the microphone? First row.
Namaste, Bhante. I'm always lost, like awareness and mindfulness. So, because some they refer as awareness and mindfulness. And what is the right awareness or mindfulness? That's what I like to ask Bhante to clarify. Thank you.
Okay. So good question. So the difference between awareness and mindfulness. The Pali words that are used here mindfulness is usually the Pali word is sati. I'm sure we have all heard about that. And awareness, the closest to that one is probably sampajanya. Or sometimes also they translate is clear knowing or awareness, sampajanya. And often these terms actually come together, sati sampajanya. And so the distinction might not in all contexts be so relevant, yet there is subtle differences. Actually, mindfulness comes originally from the word sarati, to recollect, smriti in Sanskrit. So to remember, to recollect something, this is mindfulness. The definition that the Buddha gives in the sutta is a person remembers what was said or done long ago. This is mindfulness. And remember that whenever Ananda, the Buddha's disciple and helper, was declared foremost by the Buddha in sati. Why? Because he was always walking so slowly and mindfully? No. Why was Ananda declared foremost in mindfulness? Anybody knows? What do you think? What was the outstanding quality of Venerable Ananda? Memory. He could remember all the Buddha's words and recite it verbally. Even after the Buddha passed away, they invited him to the first council because of his great memory. He could recollect all the Buddha's teachings like a living MP3 recorder. So he was declared foremost in sati, mindfulness as we commonly translate it. Not because he was always so mindful, and what we often mean with that, but basically recollection, being able to keep something in mind. But mindfulness also has to do, because even in meditation, this sense of present moment awareness is also an act of remembering your meditation object. So if you do mindfulness of breathing, you're recollecting from moment to moment your breath. You must not forget, now I'm breathing in, now I'm breathing out, from moment to moment. So this is the recollection quality, keeping something in mind. So this is the function of sati, recollecting either what is happening right now or something that has happened long ago. So keeping your meditation object in mind is a present moment awareness, sometimes they call. Truly, it's actually a recollection of what has just happened a moment ago. So this is what we call mindfulness. And then sampajanya, clear awareness, is you know what is the situation, kind of. For example, there's one example where we can see that sampajanya is not always even wholesome. Sometimes in most contexts it is wholesome, knowing, now I'm standing, now I'm sitting, now I'm walking. So this is sampajanya. You know that kind of thing. But sampajanya can also be associated with unwholesome mental states. In the Vinaya rules for the monks, there is one that is called sampajana musavada. Sampajana musavada. Musavada, you understand, right? Musavada veramani sikavadang samadhyami. Abstaining from lying. But then sampajana from musavada, what does sampajana mean? Some people say sampajanya means wisdom. Speaking a lie with wisdom? It cannot be the case. Sampajana means clearly knowing what you're doing. So when a person lies or misrepresents the truth, sampajana means you know I'm misrepresenting. It's not just a slip of the tongue. It's not a misunderstanding. I believe this to be true. Actually, really, it's not true, but I do believe it. So therefore, I say it. This is not sampajana. It's not a knowing, a deliberate lie. But if you know something is not true and you say it, then it is sampajana. It's a knowing lie. So sampajana means knowing what is going on, knowing, being aware. Whereas mindfulness recollects something from the past, either a meditation object or even a story that you have heard or whatever. And as I said, usually they come together, in Dhamma practice at least. And even mindfulness, there's a bit of a controversy. Some people say mindfulness is always wholesome. Well, in Theravada Abhidhamma, yes. But actually in the suttas, there's also something you can find. It's called miccha sati. Wrong mindfulness. Miccha means wrong, not samma. Sama is right mindfulness, right speech, right effort, noble eightfold paths. But there's also miccha sati, miccha ditti, wrong view, miccha sati, and even miccha samadhi. How can sati be miccha, wrong? Well, mindfulness is just, you know what you're doing, you recollect something, or being very careful with something. For example, somebody like a sniper at war times is lying there with the gun, waiting for the right moment. He's very mindful, you know. And then when the target comes by, he breathes in, holds the breath, and pulls the trigger. Anapanasati also happening, huh? Is this the kind of mindfulness, is this wholesome or unwholesome? You tell me. Unwholesome. So the presence of mindfulness does not mean that it is wholesome. But mindfulness does help you to accomplish whatever goal you're trying to accomplish. Whether it's making a bomb or whether it is making a flower bouquet. For both you might need mindfulness, but not both are equally wholesome. So it's actually another mental factor that decides what is wholesome and what is unwholesome. What is it? What do you think? It's not mindfulness. What decides, which mental attitude or state decides whether something is wholesome, a thought is wholesome or unwholesome? Knowing? Knowing is good, but again, awareness also good, but not enough. Right view, that's a very important one also. Consciousness? Conscience, yeah, that comes also very close. Freedom from the hindrances? Clear comprehension? No, because clear comprehension, you can even speak a conscious lie with clear comprehension. I'm lying now. The same for knowing I'm saying something unwholesome, doing something bad. That is not a guarantee that it's wholesome. Intention. Intention is the one that, volition, intention, that is the one that makes a mental state wholesome or unwholesome. If you intend to harm somebody, it is unwholesome. If you intend to help someone, that's wholesome. Did you say the right thing first? Intent to harm is unwholesome, intent to help is wholesome. But it depends on your intention. Sometimes even, normally we would say, well, taking a knife and cutting open another person is unwholesome, right? Well, it depends on your intention. If you're a surgeon, you're trying to save someone's life, to operate the person, the same action, the intention to cut open, is wholesome. You're trying to save someone's life. So the intention matters a lot. So it's the intention that tells you whether an action is good or bad, wholesome or unwholesome. And then the other mental factors like mindfulness, knowing, awareness, they come along for the ride. But actually the one that decides is it wholesome or unwholesome is your intention. What are you trying to achieve? Your volition. Okay? Keep it at that. Maybe one or two last questions. We are running a bit short in time. Yes? Take the microphone. You can take the microphone.
Bhante, in that case, is there a danger that a person falls to the so-called dark side, or in the sense that the mindfulness is veering towards unwholesome states?
Yes, of course. I mean, mindfulness will help you to decide whether something is wholesome or be aware, now I'm going to do this. Because if you're absent-minded, when mindfulness is gone, then you have almost no chance to direct the mind. It's like an airplane on autopilot. Then your habits will determine what you're doing. The things that you always do, this is what you will do. So you're always in this environment, you're meeting the same friends, they always go drinking, your habit determines. But if you have mindfulness, then you have a chance to interfere and say, okay, I see, I'm here now together with my friends. We're going to drink now, am I going to join or not? So you need the mindfulness to have a chance to decide what to do. If you're lost in thought or lost in activity, then you kind of function on autopilot. So then the chance to give a wholesome direction is not so clear and not so strong. So mindfulness is useful, of course, so that you can give the right direction, that you remember what you're doing right now. Okay? Yes.
Hey, hi, Bante. Thank you for your sharing. It's very inspiring to me. I would like to go back to the question about moderation.
Moderation.
So if
yes.
someone is ill, and the person is trying to source a lot of ways to recover, what is your view on that? Thank you.
I had difficulties understanding. Can you try to repeat? A
If the
person is not
If the
moderate.
person is ill and they're
Is
trying to
ill.
find ways to find a cure,
Mhm.
how does it relate to moderation?
Okay.
Thank you.
So a person is sick, is ill, maybe even a terminal illness, and then how can that relate to moderation? There are some cases where some treatments, for example, can be very expensive, and especially certain cancer treatments, or you have to be hospitalized for a long time, or maybe hanging on that life support machine every day costs a lot of money. And there comes a time where it's the question, what should we do now with our family member, with our mother, uncle, grandparents? Because the chances for the person to come back, sometimes you don't know. Or sometimes the chance might be quite low already. So maybe now already 90 years old, but connected to the life support machine, not approachable anymore, we cannot have a conversation. But technically speaking, the body is still moving, still breathing. So what to do with the person? And for how long are we going to continue with that? So this is a very difficult decision to make, because who will want to turn off the machine and then lose probably forever and take on this responsibility? So of course, at that time it's almost too late, because you cannot ask the person anymore. But while you're still healthy, or maybe when you get into your 50s, 60s, it's a good idea maybe to think about these things already in advance, and then inform your family, when this situation happens, do this with me. If that situation happens, do that with me. Keep me on life support, maybe for 2 weeks, a month, whatever. But then make it clear that they already know what to do. Otherwise, your family members will have a very tough choice to make. And nobody wants to have that karma making decisions like that for their parents, for their grandparents. It's very heart-wrenching. So it's also fair to your family members to let them know in advance. Sit together and think it through and let them know. And then basically when the situation happens, they just follow the protocol. Then you made your own decision and they just follow whatever you said, rather than they having now to make all these tough choices and the family will start to quarrel and so on. So moderation in that sense can mean also to know, when I get old, I don't want to be the cause so that the whole family savings are going to be wasted now or spent on me giving my old life now another 2 weeks or another month. I'm already unconscious. Please turn off the machine after 2 weeks or whatever. So moderation can mean knowing also what to accept, but also knowing actually what not to accept. Or like for monks, certain treatments also can be very costly. I may choose to take some natural treatment or traditional Chinese medicine rather than some expensive operation. And then if it doesn't work out, in the worst case, what can happen? You die. Well, it sounds quite bad. But then from our Buddhist perspective, death is not the worst thing that can happen. And death is also a new birth, isn't it? So this life comes to an end, but then if I'm already 80 years old in pain, or 90 years or more, my mind is weak, the body is ailing, actually having a fresh birth somewhere, coming out as a baby again, it can be quite a relief. And you're young, strong, functional, and growing again. So in that sense, for the person who is dying, death is sometimes not the worst thing. It's more for the relatives who want to, because of our attachment, we want to have the person around forever. But the person, him or herself, might be quite ready already to move on. So it's also good to keep that in mind, whether our help, is it really for him, for her? Or is it basically just for me to feel good because I don't want to lose my dear father, mother, friend, grandparents? Because for them it might not be so bad, especially if they have been living a wholesome life, a good life, have been good people, kindness, generosity. We don't have to worry about these kind of people because their rebirth will be a good one. In fact, they will have a better life afterwards than all of us here together because they've done the good karma, the preparation that leads to a good future destiny. So letting the person also move on is not the worst thing for them. So then also we have to work on our own attachments and understanding to say, okay, you had the full life already, 40 years, 50 years. Of course, it's always too early. We never want to lose someone. But we can say, well, we had a good time together, and every life has come to an end. Sometimes I remember, when I was young, I was a musician, and I liked to go to many of the concerts of my idols and other musicians. So I visited many of the big concerts at that time. And yeah, you have a wonderful time together with the band, with the performers, for 1 hour, 2 hours sometimes. And then, but of course, every concert also has to come to an end. And sometimes you can shout, please come out another time, then you say, come back. It's like somebody who's getting old and sick, and then, okay, he gets the right medicine, he comes back, or get the pacemaker, he can continue his life. But eventually, every concert comes to an end. But I will always remember the feeling that I had at the end of the concert, when the concert was over. I never felt sad. I felt a sense of gratitude, of having had the opportunity to spend time together with these wonderful performers, with these great musicians. I had a sense of joy of having had this good time together. And this is exactly the feeling, actually, that you could have and that you should have when a close family member, a friend, passes on. Gratitude for the great time that you have had together. Sometimes it's not just days or weeks. Sometimes you have been living together for years. And now the person moves on. So there can be a sense of joy. Oh, how wonderful. I had the opportunity to spend time with this person. So like at the end of a concert, even the greatest concert has to come to an end. It's this time of letting go. Say, how wonderful. Please move on. Thank you so much for having been here. In the same way, I also wish you all the best. Thank you so much for having been here, hosting me here today and having this wonderful Dhamma discussion together.